A warm welcome to all on the second day of the ECDF Worldwide Digital 2020. And today we have two sessions lined up, 30 minutes per session. And we're going to start with the session by Dr. Sue Allingham. Her topic is the importance of understanding emotional well-being. Dr. Sue is a consultant editor at Early Years Educator, and she's the founder of your Early Years Out-of-the-Box consultancy in UK. And this session will be followed by another session by Azura Abrasid that is going to last for 30 minutes. And the topic that she'll be covering is supporting mathematical development in young children. Now I hand over to Dr. Sue to start with her session.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Thank you. Am I able to share my screen, Dr. Vasavi?
Yes, you'll be able to.
Brilliant, thank you. And there we go. I would like to say good afternoon to everyone. It's just gone 12 o'clock midday in England on a very wet, pouring day. And this afternoon, I'm going to be speaking to you about the importance of understanding emotional well-being. Obviously, at a time like this, we are in a world pandemic, and possibly understanding emotional well-being is even more important now than it ever was, although we mustn't forget its importance should we ever go back to a normal way of living. So I have three aims in this session, and I'm going to get you to be thinking and making notes through all of this as well. And I'm going to look at emotional well-being through three different lenses. How are you in the world? Getting it right from the start, and the importance of balancing body and mind. Now, some of you have seen me present before, and you know that I always open my presentations with this quote: "Children are not a distraction from the most important work. They are the most important work." Now, unfortunately, I found out last week that C.S. Lewis probably didn't say this, but never mind, it's a really important, useful thing to hang on to. I think so often as teachers, we get so bogged down in paperwork and planning and data and things that are attendant on our teaching that sometimes we actually forget the children are the most important thing. So first things first. Take a couple of minutes to jot down how you feel at the moment and why you feel as you do. It's interesting because we're all in different, or many of us are in different time zones. So how we feel is going to be a bit different depending on whether it's evening where we are or daytime where we are or what part of the day it is. Oh, somebody just gave me a feeling. That's nice. What were you feeling as you got ready for this session? I was feeling a bit fraught because it was pouring with rain out my office in roof. We have a young person joining in, which is nice. Thank you. I got a bit fraught because I had to move in from my working environment, my office area, because the rain is so loud on the roof out there that you wouldn't be able to hear me. So it's all these things that contribute to feelings. As you're writing that down, I'd like for you to consider as well adding to your notes throughout the session, because your feelings might change. So start jotting down how you feel. Oh, for some reason my slides aren't moving on. So adding to my fraughtness, I can't make my slides move on. Do we have tech support? Because my slides won't move on.
to try clicking on your slide and then trying to move it with your little arrow button or however you're. There we go.
Thank you. Genius,
You're
Catherine.
welcome. You're welcome.
That makes me feel better. So here's a list of emotional feelings to start with. A lot of these, well, many of these things can go on in our heads, but we don't manifest them with our bodies or our faces. Some of us are more adept at covering up our feelings than others. But how do we know when children are feeling these things? Notice they're not all negative things. There are some positive things too. Emotions are not always about negativity. They are often about things we can't cope with, or maybe really lovely things that are so exciting we can't cope with them in a different way. Children go through all of these, adults go through all of these, and it's important to realise that when we're talking about understanding emotional well-being, actually, although the children are most important when we're at the settings, we mustn't forget the adults we work with feel like this as well. But we must never make assumptions. So here's a random selection of photographs that I took from the internet. I don't know these children. I don't know why these photographs were taken. But each one of us could tell a story about these children without even knowing why they look like that. It is very easy to assume that each one of these children is in a negative mood. But actually, are they? For example, the little boy on the top left with the orange jumper blocking his ears might well be saying, okay, I've had enough, I want some peace and quiet. Or he might be playing a game. It might be a positive thing. The little boy leaning against the brick wall on the bottom row looks puzzled, or does he look angry? Or is he frowning because somebody's upset him? It's very easy to assume and make a judgment. These children are all different ages. The little child in the top row with one finger in, I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl, his or her ear, might simply be trying to make somebody understand something, but obviously doesn't have the language in which to do it yet. Do you know what's in their heads? No, you don't. You don't know what they've seen or heard. If they turn up at your various settings like this, it's very easy to make a snap judgment, but the child involved may not have the vocabulary to be able to tell you exactly why they look like this facially. So why is it important to look a bit further than the physical manifestations of the emotions? Well, we have to get it right from the start. And sometimes we need someone who will take the time just to listen. And I love this picture of the child with the teddy bear. Actually, I should have brought my big teddy in. I have a big teddy that I've always had in my environments with me for the children just to talk to. And when I was still a class teacher, he was actually part of the class and he had his own little uniform and everything. And the children could just go away to a corner and talk to him. Hopefully, you're still making notes as you go through and words about emotions and how you feel and what you're thinking. But hopefully all of you are here because you've chosen to be here. No one has said to you at whatever time it is in your particular time zone, you have to switch on your laptop and you have to be part of this session. So you will know why you're here. The children who enter your settings, however, have not made that choice themselves. And when that was said to me once, years and years ago, it was a really salutary lesson to me. As adults, we decide where our children are going to go. We might take them on a couple of visits, but we make all the decisions. So this child hasn't had any agency in why they are at your setting. So it's worth querying, how would you feel if somebody said to you, tomorrow, this is where you've got to go and you're going to be there for the next however many minutes? I love that we're getting children in this. So, reflecting on that, the child hasn't chosen to be at your setting. Then just reflect on the fact that they are entering an entirely different environment to the one they have been used to in their home or with their relatives. How much of what you do within your setting is the same as what the child is used to within their home or relatives' lives? How many rules and routines that you have in your setting reflect things children are used to? And how many rules and routines are for the children's benefit or for the grown-ups' benefits? Again, when I first ever heard this kind of conversation years ago, I began to look at things in a very different way. And now when I do all my visits and settings around the country, I quite often notice the children have to abide by the adults' timings. So if it's snack time, everyone has to stop for snack. But actually, if they watched the way the children were working in the environment, snack time can wait a little bit, or it might be earlier because the children really need to eat now. It's that kind of thing. So use these questions when you go back to your setting to reflect on how you are demonstrating respect for the children, or is it just something that's more convenient for you? Now, I actually was here for these photographs, and it's part of a book I wrote some years ago about transitions in the early years. I was behind the camera for this, so I felt slightly awkward. But this little girl had just started at a playgroup quite near me in a place called Brentford. Some of you may know it's quite near Heathrow. So it's her very first day. She'd been to visit with her mum, but today Daddy brought her. So that's two different things already. Mummy wasn't there, and this was the day that Daddy brought her, and she was actually going to stay. Now, remember we were talking about adults and children's emotional well-being. Look at both their faces. Do they feel relaxed? The little girl's eyes tell a lot. Daddy's face is somewhat anxious. As I say, I didn't feel particularly good about the fact that I had a photographer there and he took this photo, because of course that added to the imbalance of the comfort for that little girl. However, Daddy is now standing behind me and the photographer, and the little girl has allowed herself to go to her key person, who she had actually met on the visit with Mum. This lovely lady whose lap she's sitting on is called Beryl, and as far as I'm aware, she's still working at the setting. Look at what Beryl is doing. Now, you can't see, but that book they're looking at is actually a book of family photographs of all the children in the setting. And the little girl is being directed to photographs of her family. So she can see Daddy is still behind me and the photographer, but she can also see the rest of the family is in that book, in those photographs. The little boy on the left-hand side has noticed that the photographs of his family are on the next page. So he's come to join in as well. Look at the difference in the little girl's face now. She still looks anxious, but she's not looking at Daddy. She's allowing herself to sit on Beryl's lap and look at the photograph. Now, the next page is an even bigger step. There. 2 or 3, in fact, very significant things have happened here. The first one is that she's got a coat on. Now, I don't know what it's like in your settings where you are, but if a child puts their coat on when they're new in a setting in this country, they think they're going home. But Daddy has now gone. She said goodbye to him. She has now put her coat on, but hasn't assumed she's going home, which is a huge step. And a different key person has taken her into the garden. She's beginning to feel secure. Beryl's not there. Beryl's doing something else. But this key person has been able to bring her outside. Confidence is building. Now, this is all in an hour's space of time. It's really good. And then in the next photograph, she's on her own outside. Because they took the time to show her that she was valued. Her emotional well-being was strengthened. She knew that if Daddy had gone from the setting, Daddy still existed, because there's those photographs. I can go back and check that my family still exist and that they will come back and collect me because I know where they are. It's all about telling the children and supporting them with their family and their familiar things. Look at the concentration on her face. So, this is a quote from an author called Marian Dowling. If you come across any of her books on well-being and social and emotional stuff, Marian Dowling is well worth a read. Look at how the playgroup I just shared with you looked at what the children's feelings might be when they started nursery. And how do you know what the children's feelings are when they start nursery? Think back to those pictures I showed you at the beginning, the different children with different expressions and tears and anger possibly on their faces. I am sure that many of us have seen things like that when children start with us. But how do we know what their feelings are and how do we enable them to express that? Because actually, this is Liz Brooker, another well worth reading author. Some of these children have been through far more in their short lives than we ever have. I mean, I've only ever moved house 3 times, whereas some children move house ever so often and change family circumstances. We need to take this into account. So we looked at getting it right from the start, but we also need to reflect on the balancing body and mind. Emotional well-being is not just about what goes on up here, it's about our entire bodies being balanced. And I had to use this picture I took in a school somewhere of balancing. And I reflect on my life as a child. I wouldn't have been able to do that because I was really scared of things like that, which says a lot about me. So we go through all sorts of changes. We already have in the last 20 minutes. But the youngest children that we work with go through sensitive periods of brain development. Now, this is a Svanberg diagram, and you can see his name at the bottom of the diagram if you wish to follow it up. But look at that emotional control. It peaks around the ages of 1 to 2, but look how it drops off after 3. And if we don't get that emotional well-being right in those early years we have those children, we're going to have a bit of a roller coaster ride after that. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Maslow's hierarchy. Thinking about balancing body and mind, look up at each of the stages of the triangle towards self-actualization and notice it's not just about mind. Look at how many physical things are going on in there. Emotional well-being ties all of these things together to meet our physiological needs. And I just thought I'd put in a bit of brain development for you. What is important to notice in this is that the frontal lobe is the bit that develops first. And look what's covered in that, the emotional and behavioural control and the personality. Then, but just behind that, you've got the motor cortex, the movement. And that bit all develops before the bit at the back, which gives you your sense of arithmetic, spelling, etc. If you can't get the emotional bit right, the, if you like, academic side of it is not going to sit so easily. Another quote from Marion Dowling, who I mentioned earlier. How often do we say to children, it's all right, don't worry, mummy, daddy, whoever will be back in a minute to pick you up. But actually they won't be back for another 3, 4, maybe even as many as 6 or 8 hours. Should we jolly the child along? I once got told a story by a senior person, actually, who said it was a really good idea to get mummy, daddy, or whoever the carer is to leave their front door key with you so that you can say to the child when the adult has left, don't worry, mummy, daddy, whoever has left the front door key with me. They'll have to come back for the key. And so, okay, they'll have to come back for the key, but what about me? I want to go home too. How does that make you feel as a strategy? Because I think as a small child, I'd be quite upset. How would that make you feel on your first day at a setting? I was even told it was a good idea to get the teachers in the setting to have spare keys in their pockets so that they could pretend that mummy, daddy, or whoever had left the key. I wasn't impressed. Because one size of ways of doing things will not fit everybody. One day when you get to meet me, I'll tell you about my collection of Converse trainers, probably about 40 pairs I've got for different occasions. But you cannot look at an individual child or an adult and deal with them in the same way as you would deal with another. Because adults and children have their own thinking. Now imagine that it is your very first day at school and you walk into this as a child. How does it make you feel? Who made the decisions here? And who is it for the benefit of? Now, I'm not going to comment on this. This is for you to reflect upon. But if you are possibly a 3 or 4-year-old and this is your nursery and you come into this, how, if this is something that you're not used to because you haven't chosen to be here, remember, how is this going to affect you emotionally and physically? Look at the space, look at the environment, look at what's happening. What messages are we giving the children through something like this? On the flip side of this, if you're an adult visiting this setting and you've never been there before, how does it make you feel emotionally and physically? How does the behaviour chart make you feel emotionally and physically? How would you feel if this behaviour chart was up in your staff room and every day a senior person watched you in your environment teaching and decided whether or not you were a rainbow, a sunshine, or a rain cloud? Because they'd seen you teaching and they approved or they didn't approve. Imagine you're that small child, and I have had this story for real, who visits their new classroom just before they start, and the teacher talks to mummy and the teacher talks to the child, and the teacher tells the child all about this behaviour chart. And if the child is good, they can go on to the rainbow. But if the child is naughty, they go on to the rain cloud. That child, through the entire of the few days after that, before she started that class, had nightmares. That's no way to start the emotional environment off. We bombard our new children, or all of our children, new or old, with so many different things, but how often do we actually think about what they feel and they think, their emotional and physical well-being? How often do we enable them to develop in the contexts and environment around them? That's from our English document, the Early Years Foundation stage. Look at the children in these photographs. Look at their physical and emotional confidence. They have been enabled to develop their thinking skills. They've been enabled to think about things, to problem solve, to try things out. The adults, and you can see adults in the picture on the right-hand side, the adults are enjoying the moment with the child. They've enabled it to happen. What we tend to forget, I think, is that we have to understand physical literacy as part of emotional well-being. Physical literacy is really important, because it is developing the thinking skills alongside the physical and the emotional skills. If we can deal with something physically, and look at the way she's upside down and the way the little boy's balancing and wheeling a tire along, if we can deal with something physically, we can be strong in our own feelings, in our own body. Remember I said I wasn't able to balance long planks when I was a little girl? Jan Dubiel wrote this in his book about assessment, but it's very important where we are now. We work with children. When we work with children, we connect ourselves to the future. Through inspiration, guidance, and wisdom, we have an impact on children's lives. We understand them and their perceptions of themselves and the world around them. Now, this isn't about early assessment, but actually it's vitally important about children in general. I've also got a Malaguzzi comment on that as well, which I will read to you. The environment you construct around you and the children also reflects the image you have about the child. There's a difference between the environment that you are able to build based on a preconceived image of the child. Think about the things we saw in that picture of that classroom. Preconceived image of the child, and the environment that you can build that is based on the child you see in front of you, like these children. The relationship you build with the child and the games you play. An environment that grows out of your relationship with the child is unique and fluid. The quality and quantity of relationships among you as adults and educators also reflects your image of the child. Note how that talks about how the adults are with each other as well as how they are with the child. One of my absolute all-time favourites, Yuri Bronfenbrenner. Every child needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her. Absolutely right. Because if we are not irrationally crazy about the children that we work with, to the extent that we get them, we understand them, we develop things with them rather than to them, we are not going to get the best emotionally well-balanced children that we possibly can. And sometimes, sadly, sometimes quite often, the children that we have in our settings do not have that irrationally crazy about them person at home. So we are that person, and we need to understand that child and enable them to be them. Because learning is for life and not just for school. I think that's really important. This is something I actually watched happening across the setting. This little boy spent about an hour doing this. He had loads and loads of sellotape and he had boxes too. And the adult enabled him simply to experiment with problem solving, putting those boxes together. Questions for reflection, which I will leave with you. I won't read them out to you to take away. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sue. Really, the importance of understanding emotional well-being is so pertinent. And when you talked about the first day at school, you know, it's that separation anxiety the children have, you know, when they are first stepping out into out of their own comfort level or comfort zone to a new world, you know, that's completely a new world. And the adults really need to work on their developing the comfort level at that new setting. Absolutely, they need that.
Mm.
And thank you so much for this wonderful session. And so we move on to the next session. Now, from the frontal lobe of our brain, we go into the logical reasoning part of our brain, and that is where Azura Abrasid comes in. She would be talking about supporting mathematical development in young children. And Azura is the head of early childhood education program in Veritas University College, Malaysia. A warm welcome to you, Azura, and over to you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Wasabi. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I'm really honored to be here. Actually, I always get embarrassed when people try to introduce me as a head of program in early childhood, because I started off, my basic degree is actually in maths education. So I started off teaching in high school, maths in high school. So that's where I figure out how hard, I mean, like the difficulty that faced by many students on grasping maths concepts. So that's when I went back down in early years in early childhood education. So 15 years in early childhood education. So I just like figured there's no other way to correct the maths concept for higher level education unless we strengthen it in early years during the preschool years. So actually, so yeah, that is the topic that I am going to talk about today. So let me share my slides. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll be talking about supporting maths development in young children. So NAEYC and NCTM, for your information. So NAEYC is actually a National Association for the Education of Young Children, while NCTM is a National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. So they provide a joint statement saying that early childhood mathematics promote good beginning. In their joint statement, they stated out that all young children should experience high quality, challenging and accessible mathematics experience. So they point out that children need access to hands-on materials, and children also need time to manipulate and explore with the materials in their play. So this play can promote numerous maths concepts. We know children come to school already knowing many maths concepts. So researchers has also found out that actually math skills are better predictor of future school success than language and literacy skills. So as all of you know, we have very heavy focus on language and literacy in preschool. So it's a bit tricky for us to talk about maths. But whether we realize it or not, the one of the positive things that, I mean, like it has really shown that that there is actually a vast amount of maths learning that goes on in the age of 3 to 5 years old. So now let's see the common core and standard of maths learning we need to provide as teachers. Okay. Sorry. Okay. These 5 content standards will really help all of us to realize that maths is not only counting and finding out how many things we have. So children are also beginning to add and subtract or divide things up so that they can share. And when we talk about shapes to children, children will not only looking at the shapes, but actually they are putting shapes together to create bigger shapes, or they are making different shapes. So there are actually 5 contents in maths, and these 5 contents area should be heavily reflected in early childhood classroom. So let's go through one by one. Okay, so the biggest area in the content standard of maths is actually numbers and operations. At this early age, children is just started to figure out counting. they are figuring out how many do I have, how many my friends have, you know, who has more, who has less. And so if at this age, if teacher can capitalize it during daily routine in school, like how many biscuit do you have? I mean, like during lunchtime or snack time, how many biscuit do you want me to put on your plate? So, and when the children give the number to us, so they say let's say they said I want 5 biscuit, and we put 5, and we can just treat them to more complex questions like, what if I put less than 1? How many will you get? You know, that kind of thing. So and this can also happen during playtime. At the sensory table, we can ask the children how many ducklings are there, how many are swimming to the left, how many are swimming to the right, or we can bring it to the more complex one, like how is it if I bring another mommy duckling, how many ducks will be here? So that is one of the concept for numbers and operation. So algebra, you probably think it's ridiculous for a 3 years old to do an algebra. So no small children should be doing algebra. So however, whether you realize it or not, when they started to sort materials, according to different groups, they have already started doing algebra. And in maths, when you make a particular rules and you generalize it, it's actually an algebra. Okay, we can give them a lot of things to sort and classify. They can put into category based on their rules or what we suggest. It could be colors, shapes. It can be many classifications. Soon they will understand the attributes. So they can create other math relationships, which is pattern. So like you can see here, the color patterns, it goes green, blue, green, blue. So when we put it in a rhythmic pattern, the kids will catch on really quickly on the pattern concept. So this is extremely important, as when the children move to 2nd and 3rd grade, they can, I mean, like they are expected to make a pattern and apply it to a number system. Okay, next we move to geometry. So when we talk about geometry, of course we think about shape. Okay, shape, we do lots of things with children. Shapes puzzle, shapes book. This is a geo board, so we ask the children to create a shape. So what I noticed is actually when we look into the shape that we buy, but I mean, like, well, it comes from most distributors, toys distributor. Like if it's a triangle, it's a perfect triangle. You know, it looks like this. But children need to understand that the triangle can be a different kind. It can look long, flip, flop, you know, something like this. This need to understand that triangle is when 3 straight sides connect, regardless how floppy it is, upside down, whatever it looks like, as long as 3 straight sides connect, it's called a triangle. So and for this, in this case, I think it's really important for us teachers to make the material ourselves, to make children realize that shape can come in different size and positions. So talking about position, we often forget that geometry relates to positioning and location. Okay, when children are playing block, building a building, whatever their city they are building. So we can actually ask the children, and we have a toy car, let's say we have a toy car, we can ask the children, why don't you park the car on the right side of the building, or why don't we move the car behind of the building? So that is a positioning and location. So same goes to the girls when they are playing with their doll house. We are moving the doll from the second floor up to the third floor, and we are going up the stairs, down the stairs, you know, the locations. So, all right, and then we go next to the measurements. At first, for children, measurement is about comparing themselves with their siblings. I am shorter than my sister. My sister is taller than me. And they started lining things up, you know, the toy car. So they will probably say that, I'm making a long traffic, you know. And as they develop this concept, they will soon figure out to measure, for example, how many blocks does it take to measure my feet? How many blocks does it take to measure my dog's feet? And when children engage in this kind of activity, they are learning really important measures, concepts like we need more or less blocks to measure certain things. We can eventually integrate it with measuring tape, as you can see here. Yeah, so these are some really important ways to encourage measurement concept in early maths. Okay. Finally, our last standard content, you know, when children are sorting their toys, that is their data. Their data that they are is a stuff that they are interested in. It's also something that they can vote on, regardless whether whatever classification they want to. It might be the smell, colors, shapes, whatever their preference are. So this area is called data analysis. Soon when the children have started sorting, we can integrate the math with other curriculum. As you can see here, it's actually science. It's just a basic simple sorting games in between three colors, blue, green, and yellow. However, we can explain that when we mix blue and yellow, it makes green. Some of you might have already realized this is actually the higher math concept I'm trying to introduce here. It's actually a set, but in higher level maths, we don't say blue intersect yellow. So we use A intersect B or A union B. So I mean, like, this is a simple thing that we don't realize that why the children really need a strong concept and foundation in early math. All right, so I pretty much simply cover the 5 content concepts in early math. So where do we start? Where do we start in terms of these number games and counting? Okay, researchers say that actually for small kids, they only know 1, 2, 3, and then a lot. I guess in any language, and in my language will be 1, 2, 3 and banyak. You know, it's actually 1, 2, 3 and a lot. 1, 2, 3 and a lot. They are not counting more than 3. Normally, it's after 3, it's a lot. So one of the key for teachers to start is actually we need to start with oral counting. Oral counting 1, 2, 3. We can start with singing. We can start by walking up the stairs, counting the steps, and never a numeric symbol yet. Okay, we start with quantity. So for preschool, I might say that as a teacher, we can start with a small card with a little dot. So for children, they will see 1, 2, 3. And you bring another card, 1, 2, and you put it side by side. They will count 1, 2, 3, and then they will count 1, 2, right? So they will figure out, actually, we can count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and they will start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can group it in, you know, they will develop this skill. So, yeah, only then we can continue teaching them a numeric symbol. So they need to understand the concept of quantity first. Yeah, so that is actually the basic math that we really need to introduce, how we need to introduce. And in regard to successful maths development in young children, it is equally important for teachers to integrate maths with other curriculum. I've spoke a bit when I integrate the maths and science just now in data analysis. So I'm going to touch a bit about language integration. So there's a lot of songs and books that tune into maths concept actually. So as you can see here, this is the 5 little monkey on the back. So it's the nursery rhyme, 5 little monkey jumping on the bed. You know, we can make this, and you know, when you sing with the children, 5 little monkey jumping on the bed, one fell down and bumped his head. You can actually explain. And as you go through like my first few slides that we talk about that the children needs the material, needs the hands-on to grasp the maths concept. So these are the things that the children need to see, touch, and hold or play with to understand what is really happening in maths operation. And another thing is the famous storybook about Hungry Caterpillar. We can create lots of maths games through the using the book. So yeah, I think that's all for now from me. I thought it would be longer, but actually like so short. Yeah, and I just want every educator, preschool educator, to make maths comfortable. And I don't know, but here in Malaysia, when we talk about maths, it's like everyone is scared about maths, don't want to teach about maths, don't want to, you know, it's not a favorite subject. So we have to make it comfortable and easy for everyone. And when we enjoy teaching, the children should be enjoying too. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Azura. And thank you, Dr. Su, for the wonderful session today. So we come to the end of today's session, and I would like to invite all the participants for tomorrow's session, which will be starting at 4:30 p.m. And the first session will be done by Ms. Simran Balani on the topic Enriching Social Quotient in the Next Gen Capital, followed by Tyron Jones too, who hails from San Francisco, US. And his topic will be Leaders in Early Childhood Education, the Journey. So tomorrow also we'll be having the session for 1 hour, which will be starting at 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. So I invite all the participants as well as Azura and Dr. Su to attend our session tomorrow. So with this, I wind up the session for today. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Azura. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
All right, bye.